Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the Republic of Poland, Mr. Andrzej Duda. He will give a statement and then take a couple of questions. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome. This time at the UN headquarters in New York, where today I was deeply honored because I was the first head of the Polish state in history who was able to chair the meeting of the Security Council of the UN, which is the most important organ in the world from the point of view of security and peace. This is what you can surely say. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a very interesting meeting indeed. We heard many important voices concerning the significance and the role of international law in the maintenance of peace and security in the world. Among the statements, there was also my statement, which I gave on behalf of my country. I raised all those issues which are important to us, and I also raised those issues which are important for the global peace and security. I mentioned the most important problems that we are faced with right now. We talked about the war in Syria, responsibility for chemical attacks against the civilian population. I mentioned the occupation of Crimea, the war in Ukraine. I also said that we are advocating the deployment of a UN peacekeeping mission so that the international peacekeeping forces can enter that territory. But I also stressed in the strongest terms that if that is to happen, those forces should be deployed across the whole territory, which today is in the hands of separatists. I also said that first and foremost, those forces should be deployed along the international recognized border between Ukraine and Russia. That is a very important request. If peacekeeping forces of UN should be deployed there, then this is the way it should be conducted. Also, according to the request of the Russian side on this one. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, I said what is important to us, historically important. I mentioned Poland's contribution in the creation of international law. I talked about our excellent scholar Paweł Włodkowic and the contribution that he made to international law. I also mentioned the heritage of Hugo Grotius. In other words, I said about what Poland's contribution was in the development of international law, in the development of those norms which are binding today and which are important for the world. At the same time, I highlighted, because that is the point of the whole debate, that the foundation of maintaining legal peace and security is the observance of international law, respect for international law on the one hand. On the other hand, I also stress the role of international tribunals which prosecute those who perpetrate crimes, who violate international law. We also discussed the Rwanda Tribunal. We mentioned the Tribunal for former Yugoslavia. We discussed the problems in Libya, in Sudan, and in other parts of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, the presence here at the UN Security Council is, of course, the most important item, most important element on my international agenda during this visit. But from the Polish point of view, what is going to be of crucial importance is all the events upcoming in the next 2 days. My visit to Chicago and my visit with the Polish-American community living in Chicago and in the state of Illinois. So I will meet, as I said, the Polonia, the Polish Americans. I hope that the meeting I will have with them at the Millennium Park will be successful. And once again, I invite all of our compatriots very warmly to participate in that meeting. I will also visit the Polish Museum. I will have a meeting with the governor of the state of Illinois. I will meet also the mayor of Chicago. Yesterday, we also had a very busy day because we met with Polish veterans in the Polish Army Veterans Association in the United States. We visited them at their headquarters in New York. I had an opportunity also to visit the archives and see the archives of the Polish Veterans Association. I admired the excellent collection collected at that museum, among others, exhibits of the Blue Army of General Haller. I could also see certain uniforms and other tokens of the Polish soldiers. The soldiers whose uniforms I could also see when I visit Niagara-on-the-Lake. And actually, I'm very happy and I thank the veterans for coming to yesterday's meeting. I thank everyone who honored me with their presence yesterday, ladies and gentlemen. I also had a meeting with representatives of Jewish organizations active in the U.S. and globally. We discussed Polish-Jewish relations. We discussed relations between Poland and Israel. All of us expressed hope that those relations will be built in the spirit of friendship in the future as well, and that our future cooperation will be going very good. And ladies and gentlemen, a very important element in the run-up to this debate here today at the UN headquarters, the debate of the UN Security Council, the meeting of the UN Security Council, was my yesterday's meeting with ambassadors of our group at the United Nations, the Eastern European Group, the so-called EEG. I met with representatives of 23 states, ambassadors from that group who permanently represent their states here at the United Nations. During that meeting, I informed them how we were planning to conduct the debate today. I flagged out what issues I would raise in my speech. We also discussed the situation within the UN about the reform of the UN, about the reform of the Security Council. I asked the ambassadors what their take on this is, what the perspective is according to them, what chances there are to reform these institutions so that the UN and the Security Council are even more effective, especially in the area of building an international climate of peace and security. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, we said that our group has never had so far a Secretary General of the United Nations selected from among the countries who are members of that group. And I said that we should make consistent efforts to that aim, to that end. And I hope that in the future, such a position will go to one of the Central and Eastern European countries. I hope that Poland will be that country, but we have to wait and see about that. We also discussed, ladies and gentlemen, the current works of the UN Security Council about all the important issues. We discussed different conflicts currently ongoing globally. I said that there is a need for us as a group to cooperate strongly and tightly. We make more than 1% of the general composition of the UN. So I stressed that it was necessary for us to cooperate on different issues, which is not easy because, of course, there are common elements, but there are also topics which are diverse, and we have discrepant views on some issues. Members of that group are Russia and Ukraine, just to mention one example. So I think I don't need to explain to you that we are not able to achieve agreement or uniform position on all matters, but I hope that nevertheless the cooperation is going to go very smoothly. Mr. President, I would like to ask you about what you mentioned at the end of your speech, namely you stress the role of international law in achieving justice. You, as I understand, mentioned war reparations or compensations, and you also mentioned flight disasters, especially the Smolensk airplane disaster. What are your expectations in this regard? First of all, if you recall, I announced in the past that in the forum of the UN Security Council, I would be willing to use my unique chance, the unique chance of Poland's membership in the Council for 2 years' time. As an permanent member, I mentioned that I would be willing to raise issues which are important to Poland from the point of view of our interest and our security. And I have no doubt whatsoever, I don't think anyone has got any doubt that from this perspective, the clarification of the causes of the Smolensk airplane crash is an issue very important to us. And I would like to make sure that a voice is heard also here in this one within the Security Council. What are your expectations, Mr. President? Well, we've got 2 years to work, and we will see what we're able to achieve. As I said, I'm not going to be silent on this one. President, you said that we've got 2 years. What would you like to achieve through our presence in the Security Council? What would you like to achieve through it for Poland? What is Poland supposed to benefit from it? First of all, ladies and gentlemen, what we want to do is to build the security architecture. First and foremost, I have no doubts whatsoever that security is crucially important for the Polish state, but first and foremost, it is incredibly important for our citizens. We are living in such an era where any dream that our world and our part of Europe would never be afflicted by war again, unfortunately, is not true. Just behind our border, there is a military conflict ongoing in Ukraine. Borders in Europe are being violated very close to our country, and I think nobody needs to be explained that today maintenance and care for peace and security is a fundamental matter, and I'm sure that this is what my compatriots expect from me. So our presence in the UN Security Council gives us a unique chance to contribute to building international peace and security. How are we supposed to do that? Well, 3 years ago, when I paid my first visit here to the UN to take part in the General Assembly, during my statement, I said that international law is of fundamental importance for peace. Back then I said peace through law. I said that it was only international law and respect for international law are able to secure peace and security. And today, ladies and gentlemen, upon our initiative, a debate was opened, and everybody repeats that. Everybody repeats these matters and this truth, namely that respect for international law and enforcement of international law is of fundamental importance. So if our activities here in the UN Security Council contributes, even to a small extent, to a better international law, to better respect for international law, I think it will mean a great success for us in terms of our own security and in terms of building international security.
James Bayes from Al Jazeera. A question in English, and if perhaps I can indulge you and ask you to answer in English for a global audience. The other Polish-born president, the president of the European Union, talked about relations with the US. President Tusk said, with friends like the Trump administration, who needs enemies? Can I ask you, do you agree with that comment? Was that appropriate from a high EU official? And how would you describe EU-US relations, particularly with regard to the Iran deal?
Mr. Donald Tusk is now not Polish politician, but is European politician. But for me, as a president of Republic of Poland, the most important is to keep Euro-Atlantic bonds in good condition. And this is, in my opinion, the most important thing from the Polish point of view. So that's all.
Is it good? Right now?
I answered.
For Secretary General, do you believe the
Panie prezydencie,
Mr. President, for many years we have heard voices that UN has to be reformed. How deep should that reform be, according to you? As I said, first and foremost, this reform should aim at ensuring that the activities of the UN Security Council and of the UN is more effective, is more efficient for maintaining international peace and security. And this is issue number one, the most important issue. So I believe that, first of all, what needs to be reformed is the decision-making process within the Security Council. And there have been some good ideas floated here, which we support as Poland.
Half years, it's Eastern Europe's turn to be Secretary General.